You're listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast with your host, Leticia Ringe, and this is episode number 24. Hello, beautiful. Welcome to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. I'm your host, Leticia Ringe, and this podcast is designed to inspire, empower, and support you on the journey of uncovering your truth and purpose in the world. If this is your first time listening, a super warm welcome to you. Each week, I share a conversation with one of the amazing people I have met on my own journey who are doing alternative, innovative, and inspiring work in the world around what they love, enjoy, and are inspired by. And that is what Create a Life That Is Beautiful is all about. It's about creating a life that you love, enjoy, and are inspired by. And that lovely includes our work. Today you'll be hearing from life coach Abby Lewtas from the Wanderlusters Mind Podcast about how she got to be doing the work she does in the world today, supporting travelers, adventurers, and nomads who are returning home after travel or living abroad. She helps them to find their feet and overcome the feelings of reverse culture shock that you inevitably experience when returning home. This episode and conversation is so fascinating. We talk a lot about travel and reverse culture shock, what travel can bring you, and also about this reverse culture shock. It's a real thing, my friend. Every single time I go back to Sydney, where I'm from, for a visit, I experience this majorly. And I feel quite blindsided by the inner conflict that I'm experiencing every time I return to my old stomping ground. We also talk about Abby's life before travel, which saw her very much in her masculine as a very successful beach sprinter, which of course saw her taking a lot of action, living in a strict and disciplined routine. And she made the decision to leave behind her sport and her 9-to-5 to travel overseas after following an intuitive call to do so, and then having the beautiful space to flow and discovering the work that she does in the world today. And this, my friend, is feminine energy, flow, intuition. So much fun. We talk about how to deal with changing relationships, including friendships, particularly as it relates to returning home after time abroad. We talk about trust, passion, curiosity, intuition, being your own best friend, how to deal with fear, worry, making the decision to become a life coach, and of course, Abby's advice for discovering your purpose. Such a great conversation. I met Abby through the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, and it was, as always, like talking to a friend that I've known for many years, and I hope you feel that too. Before we dive into the episode, I have an important and exciting announcement for you. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this. As many of you will already have heard, I am launching an online course, and it opens for enrollment this coming Monday, 25 June. It will only be open for registration until Sunday, the 1st of July, so 7 days only. This course is called Embrace Your Feminine Essence, and it is an experience to reconnect you with your feminine, yin, right brain capabilities so that you can integrate them with your masculine, yang, left brain capabilities and get the full benefit of your power as a person and bring more health, happiness, and fulfillment into your life. The course is made up of 8 modules, 4 live coaching calls, 8 guided meditations, a closed Facebook community so you can connect with other like-minded people, and lifetime access so you can dip in and out of the course as you please. I created this course because many of us are over-relying on our masculine energy. This was me not so long ago. We're very much in the hustle and grind, let's make shiz happen mentality, disconnected from our bodies, trapped in our minds, and missing out on the rest of our creative power. And when I talk about creative power, I am talking about the ability to consciously create or manifest what we want. And we all have this ability. We're doing it whether we're aware of it or not. So some of the ways you might know that this experience will be right for you include, number one, your understanding of feminine energy is, next to none. So awareness is everything, my friend. Number two, you find yourself often feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, trapped in your head, or in, worrying. That was something that I really suffered from, which I talk about in this episode. Number three, you get a lot of your sense of worth through taking action. You might even feel a little guilty doing things like taking holidays or time to rest. Number four, you feel disconnected from creativity or believe you are just not a creative person. Not true, my friend. Number five, you want to find out how to hear from and connect with your intuition or inner voice. Number six, you want to learn about a more sustainable, peaceful, and enjoyable approach to life that utilizes your full power and potential as a person. And finally, number seven, to find your purpose, which all of my work is designed to support you with, because this is an area I am super passionate about. I want more people doing work they love, enjoy, and are inspired by, because from that place, we are more creative, we're more innovative, and a whole lot more pleasant to be around. And so we all, as a community, get to benefit from your ideas, your work, and your presence. Doesn't that just sound wonderful? Okay, so to join the waitlist or enroll from Monday, head over to www.embraceyourfeminineessence. And now, let's dive into the episode with Abby Lewtas. Hi, Abby. Welcome to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast.
Thank you, Leticia. It's so wonderful to be here with you today.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you here. So to get us started, could you let our wonderful listeners know a little bit about who you are and what you're currently creating in the world today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Abby and I am, I guess, an ex-athlete. I used to be a beach sprinter and participated in a few other sports. And I guess I used to work in the city at a regular desk job, 9 to 5, and then I threw it all away to hit the road traveling. So I went over to Canada, or I went to South America first, and traveled for a couple of months. And I thought I was just going for a few months there, and then I was going to come home and figure out what to do with my life. But I sort of was running out of money, and I didn't want to go home yet. So I got a working visa and went up to Canada, and I ended up staying there for about 3 years. So after that time was done, I came back to Australia, and then it was time to figure out, what I was going to do with my life. And I decided to become a coach. So I went back and did some more study and became a life coach. And now I work with adventurers and travelers who have returned home. Perhaps they've been living in a country for a number of years, or they have just been traveling as a nomad for a few years, and they've returned back to their home country or their hometown, and they just don't know what to do with themselves, or they feel a little bit lost. They may have some sort of inspiration, but they're just not sure which way to look and which way to go next, but they do have some creative ideas. So I really love helping these people and getting them motivated and excited for that next step into their life.
That's such an interesting topic. I imagine that, you have obviously experienced all of this yourself when you returned from Canada. So it's such a great, your own personal experience to add to all of this. But I can just talk from my own experience. I've been living over here in London now for 3 years and I haven't returned yet to my home. But every time I return for a holiday, I am experiencing this really odd sense of identity, because it's my old home, my old sense of identity, and then this newer, more it's like I'm a different person, and then you're going back and merging the two, and it's really kind of awkward. So I think your work is like very special because you're dealing with that sort of issue that people experience. So tell us a little bit about after you returned to Canada, what was that like when you came back? Obviously, probably learnt a lot about yourself. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I was living in Canada and returned to Australia. And when I came home, I was really prepared for this phenomenon that I'd heard of people after they'd been away for several years. My cousin in particular, she'd gone away on a couple of occasions and stayed away for a couple of years. And I remember seeing her go through this process where she came back and she just was very unsettled, and it took her a while to get back into everyday life and really find her feet, and she had to find work. And it was the same for me. When I came back, I came back. I'm from a pretty small town down on the south coast of Australia, and I hadn't actually lived there for about 10 years, and I returned there pretty much with nothing. I didn't have a car anymore, and I knew this phenomenon was going to occur because I'd seen it with my cousin, and it was I thought I was ready for it. I thought, it's going to be difficult. So come home with an idea, something that you can be excited to launch into and get back into the community and start reconnecting with old friends. And so I had this plan in my mind, but it still didn't, matter when I came home. I still went through this phase, and it was just, there were so many different things to contend with, from mainly just the essentials to get started. I'd pretty much spent all my money, and so I came home to nothing, and I had no car, and I didn't have any work lined up. So I was back in with my parents, and I was in a small town. I had no car, so I had to find a place where I could work that I could walk to. And it was just getting the essentials, set up, and then you sort of starting to there is this excitement of coming home and seeing friends and family for the first time, which is amazing. And that can last for a couple of months, but after that, some people aren't interested, or some people, they want the 30-second story of your 3.5-year adventure, and, you just want to tell them everything. But so, yeah, getting back into the flow, and, some people, your relationships are different now, and many people have moved into a different stage of their life, and you've moved into a different stage of your life. You've had so many different experiences that, you can't relate in the same way to some of your old friends. And so it's a really different experience. So I think all of this combined can just lead you to, be in this sort of funk and question, like, what am I doing with my life? Why did I decide to come home? And yeah, you really start to question a number of things and decisions that you've made.
I just feel so understood with you speaking through all of that. Thank you so much, because yeah, it is quite difficult. Especially when you mentioned with your relationships, and also having so much to tell friends and your family, and you want to share it all, everything that you've learned. But there is not a lot of interest, and dealing with that. Obviously you've got some people who are really interested, but you're also, and I think this is for most people, will deal with a number, or maybe even many or most people not really being so interested, because everyone's got their own things that they're sort of focusing on. But you have changed so much, and you've learnt so much, and your perspective has been shifted, and you just want to, I guess, really be heard and understood. And that's not possible unless, obviously both people both people in the relationship want to, listen and take the time to learn. So yeah, it's so interesting, because I think we don't often hear about these issues that you deal with after you return home. There's the big focus on all the amazing benefits of moving away, but then how do we integrate our life when we return? And so, yeah, it's so fascinating. So can we just back up slightly for a second? I'd love to go back to, so you were a former athlete, and you were working in a 9-to-5 job. So tell me a little bit about what your life was like before you made the decision to move.
Yeah, gosh, my life was very routine. So, as I mentioned, I was an athlete. I was involved in surf lifesaving as a beach sprinter. And so I'd done this for a very long time and I was very successful. And you can get very addicted to continuing in a sport and just fronting up for the next season because it's very structured and routine and there's goals that you can set for every year, and it's a really great environment to be in. And I'd sort of been a little bit most of the time in my 20s, and sometimes I was out due to injury and other things that had occurred, but I was pairing that with a job that I had in the city, and I was kind of going off, well, what I say is off my path a little bit with what I wanted to do with my career. And I'd sort of started off in a great job of something that I really wanted to do, and then I was going off track a little bit. But I'd found a job which I was reasonably satisfied with, yet I was working at a hospital, and my office was actually in, I guess, one of the old hospital wards, and this hospital was quite old, so you can imagine an office in an old hospital ward. We had, the old oxygen taps on the wall, and walking in the in the middle of a cold Melbourne winter, I just sort of questioned, what am I doing here? And I had this life outside of my work where I was fronting up to training most evenings, sprinting and doing my weights. And the season prior, I had a serious injury where I ruptured my Achilles, and it sort of made me take a step back and realize that I had put so much into this sport, and what was I doing when I couldn't do things that were physical? What were my hobbies? And I didn't really have much, and I sort of got into photography at that time, and it sort of showed me that I didn't really have many other creative hobbies in my life, but everything I liked doing was physical. But I also sort of thought a bit bigger, that I was like, I've been doing this same sort of life year in, year out. And, my cousin was over here and she'd been off to Europe and London and South America and Canada. And she kept sort of saying to me, you would love to go and travel. Why don't you just pack up and go? I wasn't tied down. I was single and had the opportunity. And so I just really started to question what I was doing. And it was quite interesting because I just had this inkling that, it wasn't right for me to stay in this job at the hospital. I wasn't completely loving it. And every morning I get in my car to drive to work, and there were these ads on the radio that would say, what are you doing in your 9-to-5 job? They were ads for the Defence Force, but they spoke directly to me, and I just thought, yeah, what am I doing here? And I need to get away from the desk. And eventually I just decided that I'd had enough, and so made the decision. I booked the flight, packed everything up, and off I went.
Wow. And you know what's so funny? I remember those Defence Force ads because I too used to listen to them and think, oh my gosh, why can't I find something like this? Like, this isn't what I want for myself. But I wasn't going to go into the Defence Force, but they still, they did. I completely understand what you were feeling then. So do you feel like your decision to do this trip to Canada and then to stay there, did you feel like that was, an intuitive nudge?
Oh, yeah, very much so, because I just remember sort of, I wasn't sure. And, they say that's what the intuition is. You don't really know where it comes from. It's a voice, but it's not really a voice, or it's an inkling. It's something that continually, taps on your shoulder and says, what are you doing here? Is this really what you want to do? And, that feeling or sensation or voice or, the intuition, as I call it, just kept getting stronger and stronger. And I thought, you know what? No, I don't want to stay in this job at a desk in the hospital. I do want to get out and see the world, and I want to go and do something new and different, and it's going to be scary, but that's where I was led to, and everything, fell into place when I started to make the plan. So I knew that it was the right decision.
Mm. And then, so what do you think were some of the key things that traveling taught you?
Mm. Oh, such a good question, because I think traveling just teaches you so much. I think it it challenges your beliefs and your perceptions and the ways that you think, and it teaches you to become a little bit more open. I think especially I was a solo traveler, and so I had to make friends. And the environment when you travel can be quite different to when you live somewhere, because everyone or your fellow travelers are all in the same sort of situation. Everyone is quite open to making friends because, everyone is moving along and traveling here and there. So it can be quite easy to do if you're in the right place. But, there are just so many different types of people, and, you're not, I guess, fortunate enough to have the choice of picking exactly who you want to be friends with. But I think what I learned is if you're just open to having conversations with everyone, you can actually start to learn more and more about these people that maybe in other situations, if you were, settled and living in a town or a city, that you might not otherwise open yourself up to. So I think that was a really big one for me. And yeah, I just as I mentioned, as a solo traveler, you do spend lots of time on your own, and you really have to become your own best friend, because you're with yourself 24/7. And, it gives you a lot of thinking time, especially if you're traveling on buses or planes. And, if you don't have friends or companions that you're traveling with at that time, you can get lost in thought. And so it's really wonderful because you can challenge some of your beliefs and some of, your ways of thinking, and and really start to have some shifts in the way you think. And you see how other cultures live. I think you see, the way we live in our home is one way of doing things, but you go out to other countries and other cultures, and it's just infinite, the different ways of living and the different cultures. And if you're open to learn from these different cultures and people and what they do in their lives, I think that, it leads you to question, maybe this is a practice that I should be adopting, or a way of living that I should be including into my life. So I think it's really beautiful in that respect, because there's just so much out there, and it's I found that I was just continually learning and growing along the way.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful because then you as an individual take that back with you when you do return home, and you do touch the lives of people that come in that are in your circle, and that sort of gets passed on, and it doesn't end just there with the experience. You really do take it with you, and it does change you as a person. And I really love how you mentioned about relationships, because even as I moved to London with my partner Lou as a couple, but even as going over as a couple, you need to make your own friends. And to meet people, it's really strange. You're really out of your comfort zone, because so much of your life, or my life back home, was, I had a big group of friends. I'd been in the same job for 8 years. So I had my work friends, I had my the friends outside of work, and every single moment of my life was spent around people. It was either at work or it was hanging out with friends and family. And there was very little time for me to actually spend by myself. And as I look back at my own journey, I realized that was a really significant reason as to why I couldn't figure out what my truth was, who I was as a person, what my purpose was. I needed time to myself to be able to reconnect and figure out who I was. And so moving overseas, travel, while it's so you want these friendships, but they do take time to make. So you do spend a lot of time by yourself. But it was that time spending by myself where I really got to discover who I was really for the first time. So it was so special. And then also make friends based on that new knowledge of who I actually am.
Yeah, and I love that because I think sometimes when we grow up in a place and we are working somewhere, and as you said, you had your work friends around you, and you might have had friends from, potentially from university or high school, and they're kind of people that I'm not going to say that you were forced to be friends with, but they were just in the path as you went. But I love that you said that you really considered who you were and what you wanted as a human. And then you went and you found those people that were like-minded, and you created yourself a network of people who really suited what you wanted, rather than sort of saying, well, I'm going to have my friends from work and my friends from uni and perhaps my friends from sport. And so it can be really nice to then have a network of people around you that is, they're your people. They're exactly who relate to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so, and it doesn't take traveling to do that. You probably deal with this return for your clients returning back home and then wanting to maybe realizing that some of the relationships that they had maybe aren't serving them anymore, or they're not at the same sort of stage in their life. And so they need to start, curating this new group of friendship. And I've just found that a lot of us make excuses that we just, we're sort of stuck with the people who are around us. But I feel if you go out looking for what you want in your relationships, you will be very surprised to find that there are a lot of people out there who offer what you want in your friendships, in any sort of relationship. And whether it's online, but also in person, like we just sort of... It's difficult when you're comparing it to maybe when you lived somewhere before you traveled, because you're not looking at that time. So you don't see what's available. Have you sort of found that to be true?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's the same. Like, I remember when I came home and I thought, okay, these are my friends from before I left. So I'm going to just connect with all of them. But, sometimes I wouldn't hear back from some of them for a very long time, if at all. And I sort of got a little bit frustrated in the beginning, and I just sort of thought, well, here I am, I'm back, I'm making an effort. But I also had to realize that their lives have changed, and it's it's not necessarily that they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. It was just that our lives are very different now, and perhaps they're working in the city and I'm living 2 hours away, and it's very difficult to, maintain a friendship, if you're not going to be in close contact with people all the time, and if you don't have the same interests and those types of things. So I think it's very true to be able to, and very empowering to be able to have the people around you that, are your people, and they're going to support you and love on you and really just lift you up in whatever you were going to do, and they're sort of at the same stage of life as you, or they can at least relate to what you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I speak a lot about this, about building your own tribe of people that support, inspire, empower you. And I also talk a lot about that parting from friendships or relationships doesn't need to be some nasty thing. It's not like, okay, well, now you're not my friend. It is you lovingly part with these friendships just because they're not at the same sort of stage as you. And who knows, you flow back in together at the same, at the same life stage again, and then pick up your relationship from where it left off. Like, this happens all the time. And I think a lot of us, just like with our careers, we feel like with our friendships, we need to marry them and they're with us for life. But, the only relationship that truly is with us for life is the one that we have with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely found this to be true. And there was some friendships that I were trying to, nuzzle my way back into. And it just didn't feel right. I felt like I was forever the one that was reaching out. And, I didn't have to sort of say, look, sorry, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Like I'm still friendly and, I can still see what they're up to through social media
Yeah.
and if, as you said, if our lives cross again, then great. I don't feel like it's an awkward situation. It's just that our lives go in different directions. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that because I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. And it's probably, especially when you are returning home and you're so excited to be back with your friends and family, you've got all these grand plans of picking up the relationships from where they left off. And then that doesn't happen. That can be, that's a recipe to make a person question themselves. And we don't want it we don't want that to happen because really it's just as we can't control all the people around us and we can't keep everyone on the same page, and that's okay, but how beautiful it is that we've had those experiences together. And so that's sort of what to focus on and then to take your next step forward. So but I also wanted to touch on something else you brought up, which was about becoming your own best friend
yes.
and also managing your thoughts. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you found that process? And because I'm just thinking, as given that you moved in then to life coaching, how you happened to fall into having life coaching, even, as a possibility of something that you wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I think becoming your own best friend. And I think when I spent so much time traveling alone, you think a lot, as I was saying. And sometimes, you can create up stories and you can get yourself worked up in situations. And so I'd always, been a person that would journal and write things down. But I really learned that on some occasions I was really creating a story around a situation that wasn't really it didn't really require that much energy. And what I found was if I would write it out in a journal in some way and then go back and look over it, I would be like, what? You were really thinking that? How crazy. And I think the act of just writing something out can get it out of your head. But it does also really show you who you are as a person. Like this is the way you think. And and it gives you that opportunity to say, well, I don't want to think like this or waste my energy thinking on a situation or making up a story that's not necessarily true. So then you can go to work on correcting that, and that helps you become more confident. I think traveling in general, especially solo, you very much in situations that, sometimes you have no idea what you're doing. You might rock up at a bus station in Bolivia and you've got to find your accommodation and you don't speak the language and you figure it out. And I think that gives you a lot of confidence in yourself, and you can start to figure out exactly what it is that you like and what things you're drawn to, whether it's adventuring out in nature or if it's history. You can, spending time on your own, and you don't have to be traveling. You can do this any time, but reading books, what is it that interests you? And then you can really learn who you really are. And I think I experienced that process when I was traveling, when I was living in Canada, and when I came home. And I came home and I wanted to step into life coaching. I had seen a life coach before I had set off on this big adventure. And yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I remember at the time my friend said to me, because it was at a time where life coaching wasn't really a thing. And my friend had said to me, you found this person on the internet and you're really going to trust them? And I'm like, oh yeah, just, this feels right. And it really did feel right. And I remember going through the process and I really felt challenged. And sometimes I really didn't like my sessions with the life coach. And she was the most beautiful, lovely, caring woman. But I just felt so challenged because I hadn't really been ever questioned or taught to think in this way about what I wanted to do with certain areas of my life. Like I'd always been very goal driven as an athlete, but I never really thought to apply goals into other aspects and areas of my life. And that really challenged me. And after the series I did with her, I saw this magnificent unfolding of all of these things just start to come into life in the traveling adventure that I went on and a bunch of other things. And it was just so beautiful that I just thought, I want to help people have these types of experiences as well. And so that was what led me into the path of becoming a life coach. And so it was a really nice rounded circle to go through that journey.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And also that's so amazing that you did a life coaching series before you even went away. I mean, like you said, it really, I mean, still today, most people don't know. And I think in Australia and over here in the UK, it's not a big industry like it is in America. Hi beautiful, this is a quick reminder about Embrace Your Feminine Essence, which opens for enrollment on Monday 25 June for 1 week only. If you feel the call, make sure you check out the details. This course will be an experience so that you can understand your feminine energy. We talk through intuition, creativity, the menstrual cycle, our life cycle, flow, manifestation, the power of surrender, trust, allowing, and how to integrate this energy with our masculine action, logic, reason, doing, and so much more so that we are living our happiest, healthiest, and most fulfilled life. This course will show you the difference between taking action and taking inspired action that comes from the heart. Come join us. You can find the details at leticiaringe.com/embrace your feminine essence. Said that you just trusted, you just knew, you had a feeling, so you trusted that voice. And trust is, as you know, my work at the moment is all about feminine energy. Trust is a really big part of feminine energy. So I'd just love to know how trusting, your intuition or those nudges that we spoke about has shaped who you are today.
Yeah, what a beautiful question, because I think for me, I really embodied a lot of masculine energy growing up. And as I've mentioned, I was an athlete. And even when I came back to Australia, I changed sports. I was then playing roller derby, which is quite an intense physical sport. It's not graceful like ballet or something that you would sort of see as, perhaps embodying feminine energy. And I really started to stop enjoying the game and being involved. And even though I was surrounded by females playing in a team female sport, it was very competitive. It was very aggressive. And I guess I was tired of being in this space that was just so, masculine. and it's interesting, because I really sort of thought, I don't feel like I want to compete and have to be better than someone and prove myself. And I don't want to be, particularly in roller derby, you would get hit a lot. And I was like, I'm sick of being hit. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. So I sort of was able to take a step back and really start looking at the masculine versus the feminine, and realized that all these things that I'd love to do were so physical in my life. And, it was always sport and in a routine and pushing and trying to be better. And so it was really nice to sort of step back and say, well, I can start looking at what feminine energy looks like. And I think I sort of embraced that with my travels, because I left without really having any plan at all. I had a couple of dates of, I was going to trek to Machu Picchu on the Inca Trail, and that was pretty much all I had booked in. And the rest, I had zero plans. I had 2 nights booked in Buenos Aires, and I was just going to make it up as I went. And so that really allowed me to be in this flowing energy of just being able to go wherever I pleased, and I could stay here for a month if I wanted, or I could go here, and if I liked it I could stay, and if I didn't I could just go. And I think that was really nice to contrast what I'd been doing for so long with the sport, just to be able to be in that space. And I know that not all travel is like that, because a lot of people, they might have a limited time, and it's important to have an itinerary to see the best of it. But that experience was really magical, because it was just an adventure of like, where am I going to go next, and where am I going to end up, and gave me that opportunity to really sort of dive into that curiosity side of things. And I love that started to really explore my feminine energy. And, then you sort of start thinking of things like, oh, I've sort of always been this identifying with this athlete sort of persona, but actually like to wear like flowing dresses and jewelry and play with crystals and oracle cards and do that type of thing as well. And I know that's not all of what feminine energy is. There's so much more underneath it. But it really contrasted what I'd been doing in all of those years of being an athlete, just pushing and forcing and trying to be better every day in my sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, we need to have both the masculine and feminine. So it'd be interesting to see when you were an athlete. I mean, you must have found yourself in a position of being in like a flow state every now and again. And then, but we assume that that's only for athletes, that flow state. And a lot of us haven't experienced it in, our everyday sort of life. But I think the example that you gave there of travel, really just trusting that you would know what the next step was, what would be the right next step for you, which way to go, giving yourself, letting go of the control, actually thereby giving you more control, which is like one of life's paradoxes, I think. And then, where that took you, I mean, you could never have imagined that the travel that you took would have turned out in the way that it did had you planned it all in advance, just like your life, surely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really did have to trust. And I remember when I was a few days out from leaving, and my cousin, who had been one of my biggest inspirations to travel, she sort of came over to my house, and I was packing everything up, and she said to me, Abby, I can't believe that you're going on your own. And I said, what do you mean? Like, you went on your own? She said, yeah, but I never left on my own. I always had a friend that and then, I did some parts of my travel on my own, and I sort of started to panic. And, I was the day that I was leaving was looming and coming closer, and I felt so nervous for what was I going to do when I landed on the plane. I was so worried, how was I going to take the next step? And a friend of mine gave me, a really good piece of advice. He just said, just think about what is next, and then he said, you're going to go to the airport, and then you're going to get on the plane, and then you're going to sit down, and then you're going to have the flight. And it's just the next step that you have to look at. And that's, if you get too far ahead of yourself, you can get lost and in that worried state where you can become untrusting. And because, you can go down on this spiral of, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And actually what happened when I left Australia was that we couldn't land in Buenos Aires, where my flight was due to land, because there was a volcano that erupted, and there was an ash cloud over the airport. So we had to turn around and go back to Chile. And which meant that we got housed in a hotel overnight, and I made friends with all the people on the plane. And then when we eventually did get to Argentina, I had all these friends before I got there who said, well, come and catch the bus with me, or I can show you how to get there. And before I knew it, I was in my hostel making friends with people, and I was like, oh, I'm actually here. What was I even worried about? So yeah, it's taught me a lot about trust, and I really liked what my friend had told me about, in just taking those next steps and thinking about what is in front of you and what is the next thing that you have to do.
That's such great advice, and not something that we really allow ourselves ever. It's so new, and with that trust, there is the then pushing through our fears, because so we've got this one maybe really strong intuitive voice within us and we know everything's going to be okay. We know that on a very deep level, but at the same time, we are experiencing another voice that is just, projecting all of our fears. And that voice can be louder if that's the one we're tuning into. And even if we're not, it's always there. So I'd love you to talk about, how you've dealt with fear, really, doing all of these things that has really, pushed you outside of your comfort zone, and also put you in situations where, you're really questioning who you really are as a person compared to who you thought you were.
Yeah, and I guess the type of fear that we are talking about is it's really that I guess emotional fear of what we kind of make up in our heads. And I find that I have done a lot of things in my life now which have proven to me that once you do push past that and you have the courage, which in most cases, when you are facing a situation that you feel fearful about, whether, you're going to try and make a new friend and you're worried, or whatever the situation may be, it's really only a moment of like 10 or 15 seconds that you have to be courageous to actually make that step. So I sort of adopted this mentality of like, okay, it's like 10 seconds of insane courage, and then I'm either going to feel like, a bit awkward, or it's going to be completely fine and everything rolls out from there. So I think if you can experience, fear never goes away. This emotional fear never goes away. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because we don't want it to, because if we can keep pushing the boundary, we can keep going, that little bit further outside our comfort zone and doing things we didn't think we could. And what it shows you is that actually it can be really amazing on that other side after you have that 10 seconds of insane courage to take that step. And it's kind of a little bit of an adrenaline and exciting, and nervous energy and excited energy it's the same thing. It's just the way that you look at it. So it's just being able to take that step. And even in situations now, like I think, oh, I know this is going to be scary, but it could work out really amazing. And you know what, if it doesn't, you still have an interesting or funny story of what happened.
So true. I love that you talk about it just being 10 seconds of needing to take courage as well, because often that's all you need to sort of shift your brain into that different, like you say, the difference between nervous and excited. It's like, oh, actually this is an opportunity rather than, something really terrible that's happening to me. And once I push through maybe this, 10 seconds, I might actually be on the other side. How amazing is that? That's really interesting.
Yeah, because you can sit and think about something for days or weeks on end, whereas if you'd just got up and done it in the first place, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. And like I said, you can create this big story around something, and then when you actually go and do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't really that big a deal. But you do really have to let yourself be vulnerable and step into that courageous energy to allow yourself to get onto the other side and to have those experiences and prove to yourself what it's like to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and every time you do prove to yourself, that gives you so much confidence for the next time you've got to prove to yourself. You can remind yourself, remember when I took a chance? Remember what happened? Because,
Yeah.
through pushing through fear or moving through fear, there always seems to be some sort of expansion out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, things are possible. And like I've done a lot of crazy things in my life and, strange things. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't think I could ever do that. And I don't really like it. I feel like it's a bit of a throwaway statement that is based around fear. And, some things might sound audacious or outrageous and crazy and a little bit scary, but what if you actually go and you actually try and you actually go and try to have that experience or that thrill or that excitement? Like imagine the possibilities and what it could open up for you.
Yeah, one thing I love that you've got on your in your emails is always believe that something wonderful is about to happen.
Yeah, I love that quote. And
I
I
love
think
that
it's true.
quote.
Yeah, because I think so often we think like that what's the worst that can happen? And why are we thinking that? Why aren't we thinking what's the best that can happen? What amazing opportunity can come from this? I think we just need to reframe our thinking a little bit.
Absolutely. That's something that's really helped me as well. I used to be addicted to worry. I was like the biggest worrier in the world. And I guess I was sort of paid to do that as a lawyer. You had to make sure you'd covered all the bases. But when I started shifting that to, well, what if I spent my time wondering about, wouldn't it be great if this happened? How amazing would it be if my dreams, what I thought wasn't possible, actually happened, rather than spending all of that time worrying about the million different things that could happen. It's so, and that was really, I think, my study in law of attraction that really helped me with that. But so thank you. I love that quote so much. I think it's so beautiful just to be considering, what if something wonderful happened to me right now?
And just in what you were saying, like it is like why are we worrying? Because a lot of the time that what we're worrying about doesn't even happen. And how good is it to think, oh, this exciting thing could happen, or imagine how good it would be. It's so much better to sit in that positive energy rather than be like, oh no, like what if this bad thing happens and it leads to this bad thing, and then you've gone down the rabbit hole with this story that is never going to eventuate, like 99% of the time.
So true. And that brings me back, you mentioned before about the stories that we tell ourselves and also the story of who we are as a person. So much of what limits us is the story that we're telling, and we can tell the same story in a different way that empowers us, or we can tell the story in a way that gives all of our power to someone else, just not to us. And all it is a shift in perspective.
Yeah. And just like sometimes, I even find myself doing this now. It's like, am I being the victim in this circumstance? Like,
Great question.
should I be really thinking about this, thought in this way or this situation in this way? Because it's not making me feel good. And I could just think differently about it and then I'd feel better.
I know, it's so simple, and yet, we can sort of be well into the thought before we take that action to, reconsider the story that we're telling ourselves. So I also wanted to ask you, when it comes to, moving then into life coaching, that would be another sort of iteration of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And you may have also had some fears to overcome, because especially, we've got our fears are being projected to us by other people as well. How did you sort of deal with that when it came to moving into life coaching, which is so different to what, anything else you would have had done previously?
Yeah, so I remember thinking very clearly about this when I first signed up for the course. And I know that when I was explaining it to my parents and my dad in particular, it was kind of like, well, what is a life coach? And, what are you going to do with this? And so I made a commitment to myself that I wouldn't hide behind what I was doing. And I talked to as many people as possible and tell them that I was studying to be a life coach. And, I guess it was, in some ways, it was that idea of being courageous to bring up that conversation. And what I found was the more that I spoke about life coaching to people, and I'd say, I'm studying life coaching, some people would say with curiosity, well, what's life coaching? And then it would open the conversation up for me to explain exactly what it was. Or, some people might just say, that's interesting, and they wouldn't really want to talk about it. I never really found anyone was overly negative or kind of shrugged it off as, like it wasn't anything. But I think because I'd made the commitment to myself to really own it and step into it and embrace it, that it became less and less difficult, and I didn't really have fear around it. Whereas a good friend of mine, she did the opposite. She was sort of a bit worried. She's like, what are people going to think, when I tell them I'm a life coach? And I just said, well, so what? Who cares? Who cares what they think? And I remember for so long she sort of held back on having any conversations. I know that she spoke to her close friends about it, but I encouraged her to open up to the people that she was, feeling vulnerable towards. And she came to me one day and she's like, well, actually, I told, so-and-so that I'm studying to be a life coach. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was so proud of her. And I said, well, and how was it? And she said, oh, she sort of just like shrugged it off, and then we kept moving on to the next conversation. And I was like, so it wasn't as bad as what you had imagined? And she was like, not really. It wasn't. Yeah. So I think being able to step into it and own it and really embrace it for me meant that I really didn't have too much fear around stepping into what I was doing.
That is such a great example, because that's all, law of attraction. It's the energy that you're putting into it. And so that's what you received. When we go in with all this fear and we're really in the fear and it consumes us, then what we get from the people around us is going to mirror that fear. So I think that's such a great example. Thank you so much for giving that to us. I love that. And I love that you made the commitment right from the beginning that you were going to, you're really going to face your fear. You're going to put yourself out there. But by doing that, you dealt with it quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what happens if you continually think about something or hold back from doing something. It'll grow on you, and the fear will become worse and worse and worse. And, it's that story that we talked about that we tell ourselves, and it's only us having a conversation with ourselves. And until we actually voice it and get it out, that's when we realize that perhaps it's not really that bad, and it's not as crazy as what I've been making it out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've just got one last question for you on your journey. So when was the moment that you thought, I think I want to go and study life coaching?
Oh, gosh. I think it was when I came back home. It was very soon after I came back home, because I remember thinking back to having this life coach and seeing what she was doing and what she created. And she had said to me, you're very similar to me. And at the time I was, as well as working, I was also studying massage therapy. And she said, I was a remedial massage therapy, and now I'm a life coach. And I sort of, maybe those words had always just been in my head at some stage. And when I sat down and really thought about it, I was like, actually, I have done a lot of different things with my life. And then I was like, this is a way that I can bring it all together and share and help other people to go through times and have these transformations that are going to help them move forward in their lives.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And you and see how you get to, all the experiences that you had, working in the 9 to 5, the traveling, issues with friendships, all of this, the fear, stepping out of your comfort zone, leaning into your intuition, your flow, trust, all of this that's helped shape you to who you are today. You get to mold into the work that you now do today. And it's just been, from what it sounds like to me, a constant, just following what the next step is for you in each moment. And then that's, and now you're here where you are today, but you never, ever could have imagined, if you went back to, as a teenager and thought, what's Abby going to do with her life? Where's she going to end up? I bet you never would have thought it would be where you are today.
No, absolutely not. I don't know if I really knew where I was going to end up, and perhaps we're not even at the end either. What's going to be the next? What's going to be the next thing? But for me, going through that transition of returning home, it was just something that I'd never really experienced before, and I knew that this was something that occurred to so many people, and I really wanted to open up that conversation. So so that's what I've done with sort of creating the work in the world that I do today. And I also have a podcast where I share stories of others that have gone through this transition. So, we go on the travel journey of where they've been and what they've done. We come back into the depths of the time when they came home and they just couldn't relate anymore. And then we look at what they're now doing and what they've, used with their inspiration and created into what they're doing beautifully with their life. And so if you're interested in checking that out, it's the Wanderlusters Mind Podcast. So I love creating that and sharing the stories of all the beautiful people that I chat with.
Oh, that's fabulous. And it's such a great name as well. So cool. And you've also got a really great training that I'd love to mention here, your Travel to Riches, because it's dealing all with money when you return back. And I think that's a really important topic. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned previously in our chat, when I came home, I had no money. And a lot of people come home with this, that, they've had such an amazing time. They spend all their savings and they perhaps forget to keep a little bit aside for when they come back, which, is what I would advise people to do. So, but if they haven't, I've created a little step-by-step program, because it did take me a while to I'd always been really good with my money until I went away traveling. And so I really had to retrain myself to just look at what my money mindset was and what my situation was. So I just created Travels to Riches as a step-by-step process to share with other people what they can go through, or the steps that they can go through to really start to get back on track with the good money habits that they perhaps had before they went away. Because and that's a free resource that I do, because I'm not going to make people pay for that if they don't have any money. And what a great way to start to learn, or just to become aware of, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. I need to put these steps in place to really start to save and to pay off my debt, if that's what you need to do. And I go through 14 different steps that you can start to implement, and it goes from mindset into very practical tips of what to do to just really get your money and your savings back on track.
Amazing. And Abby, my final question for you today is, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, is what advice would you give to one of our listeners who might be listening to this, feeling really stuck in their current, position, whatever they're doing in their life at the moment, and they really want to find this, expansion and meaning for themselves that they can probably hear through you talking about your journey, that, they really want to figure out what maybe their purpose is, or how to find fulfillment in a career. What is there any advice that you'd give to that person listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I think what we need to do in this situation, as hard as it can be sometimes, is just take a step back and look at what it is that you really love doing. Like, what is it that excites you? What is it that makes you feel so much joy? And because I remember that's what I wasn't doing when I was stuck in my office job at the hospital. And what are the little signs and signals that are coming around you? What what could life be for you? Take that step
Mm.
back and really um, think about what and bring awareness to what it is that you really love. And yeah, maybe it sounds quite crazy and audacious and like something that you don't think could be possible, but I really encourage you to go for it because it's likely to be exactly what you need to get that new lease on life if you are feeling stuck and you feel like, there's nowhere to go. You really have to dive into thinking of what it is that you're passionate about so you can really just sort of ramp up that area of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And through curiosity, we get inspired, and then that leads us to passion. If you are someone who doesn't connect with the word passion, it is something that it is available to all of us. It's just sometimes we've got to start with something like curiosity first, and that will
Mm.
lead us there to passion.
Mm. No, and I think that just can even be doing something different, something that you're not used
Mm.
to doing, whether it's going out and going for a hike in nature or going to explore a place you've never been before. What is something that you've never done before? Because that could just lead you to the next thing that is, really exciting for your life.
That's such great advice. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Abby, for coming on to the podcast. It's been so beautiful to speak to you, and especially on this topic about travel, which I love to talk about because I just think that you learn so much about yourself when you travel, and it really forces you to get out of your comfort zone, which is a wonderful opportunity to learn more about yourself. And yeah, so I really love the work that you're doing, and I'm so honored to be able to share your story here today with
Mm.
everyone listening.
Thank you so much, Leticia. It's been so wonderful. I've really loved our conversation. I absolutely agree with you. I think travel it's like going to school for learning about yourself and learning about the world. So what more could you want?
And there it is, my friend. Thank you, Abby, for coming onto the podcast and sharing your beautiful journey and lessons with us all. I really loved Abby's thoughts on finding your purpose. I 100% agree that sometimes we just need to try something different. It's that definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over again, but expecting different results. The journey for purpose is an exploration of yourself, my friend. And this is something that I find that I guide my clients through in my life coaching offerings. And just so you know, I will be taking on some more clients again very soon in July. So if you are interested in that, please head to my coaching page on my website. Abby's journey is such a beautiful example of embracing both our masculine and feminine energy. And I hope by hearing her thoughts on this, you have a better idea about what those energies are. And if you are experiencing a move home or have already moved home and are feeling the reverse culture shock, please get in touch with Abby. Her website is abbylewtas.com. That's ABBY, and Lewtas is LEWTAS. And you can connect with Abby on Instagram at abbylewtas. Now, for one final reminder, if Embrace Your Feminine Essence is calling out to you, my 4-week online course, and you're currently thinking, I would love to explore some more of these topics. I want to feel more connected with my body, the earth, and my feminine right brain capabilities, like your intuition, creativity, and flow. Make sure you either join the wait list if you're listening to this before Monday, the 25th of June, or from Monday, register for the course. I would love to welcome you. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. You can find all the course details at leticiaringe.com/embrace your feminine essence. And you can contact me on Instagram at create a life that is beautiful. Now, what's up next? Well, next week will actually be the last episode of this season on the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. That will be episode number 25, and I have a really exciting interview for you all, so make sure you tune in next Thursday. I just want to say a really big thank you to you, whether you're someone listening to this podcast for the first, second, third, or 24th time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Your support has been invaluable to me being able to share these conversations each week, and I seriously love doing them so much, and I plan on coming back with an even better season 2. I already have some really exciting guests lined up for you all, but I just want to say thank you to you. I love hearing how these episodes inspire you, and every time I get a message from one of you, it just lights up my heart, so thank you. If you want any topics explored in season 2, send me a DM and I'll consider doing an episode on that topic for you. Or if you have any questions, send them through and maybe I can do a Q&A. Let's make this a collaboration. It's because of you guys that this podcast is possible after all, and I do it for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Make sure you head to leticiaringe.com/embrace your feminine essence if you are interested in the course. And if you aren't already signed up to my weekly newsletter, make sure you do that over at leticiaringe.com/community. Okay, see you next week. Have a wonderful week, and I'll be back with another episode to help you unlock your truth and purpose. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. If you feel so called, I would love it if you could please take a minute to rate and review this podcast on iTunes. This helps other people like you find it, and I also invite you to take a moment to share this episode with a friend you know needs to hear it.